Hi, everybody, and good evening. Hello. My name's Charlie Pecorella, and I'm a recent Sainsbury Fellow here at Poets House through Hunter College's MFA program. For those of you who are new to the space, Poets House is a nonprofit poetry library that is free and open to the public. It has been a welcoming home for poets, poetry readers, and poetry explorers since 1986, when it was founded by Stanley Kunitz and Elizabeth Cray. Holding some 100,000 poetry books and related material, this space houses one of the most comprehensive public poetry collections in the world. Additionally, in conjunction with our 40th anniversary, our digital event archive preserves and makes available recordings of readings and poetry events, such as this one, since the organization's inception. I highly encourage you to take advantage of the rich resources Poets House offers, not only in its physical and digital collections, but its free programs such as New Works, which is this, and Passwords, as well as countless workshops with highly skilled writers who are eager to work with you. I'm privileged to introduce tonight's New Works program, featuring 4 writers whose recent publications that we're celebrating tonight are stunningly human, curious, wide-eyed, contemporary, and above all tender. Each of these authors offer an alternate reality raised by what-ifs, honoring and challenging all that lies in the so-called real world, the mundane, the everyday that is simply poetry, as poetry happens every day, every minute, even. We have, every minute even. We just have to stop and notice it. We're in for a beautiful reading from these brilliant poets, Jacqueline Waters, Marie Macari, Michael Klein, and Donna Masini. Please give them a warm welcome. That was pretty warm. That was pretty good. Starting with Jacqueline, we'll have a reading from each, followed by a conversation, and a few minutes for audience Q&A. So if you have questions, and you should have questions, please keep them in mind for later. After the reading, we'll have books for sale in the lobby, and I think you're going to want to buy their books if you don't have them already, because they're really good. Okay. A very heartfelt welcome back to Jacqueline Waters, who was on staff here at Poets House from 2017 to 2018. I deeply enjoyed reading Waters' inventive, hilarious, playful, and sneakily devastating new collection, The Fry. I can't wait to return to this collection, retracing my mind over the short lines, pondering and being absolutely seized by the speaker's declarative voice that details what the world ought to be like. The thing about poetry is that you can make it up, but it has to be believable. I believe every word Jacqueline Waters stamps hard onto the page. What I love about poetry and about Jacqueline Waters' newest collection specifically is the transformative quality that appears to effortlessly dazzle and conjure truth. Here now a few words from Jacqueline, a reminder to all poets from the poem Choosing a Language for Your Project. Friends, the mind finds all unless you strongly halt it. And poets, I'm going to say, don't halt it. And here's a little bio. Jacqueline Waters is the author of 3 previous books of poetry, Commodore and One Sleeps and the Other Doesn't, both from Ugly Duckling Press, and A Minute Without Danger, published by Adventures in Poetry. Her work has appeared in Chicago Review, Harper's Magazine, the Penn Poetry Series, and on poets.org. Born in Jersey City, New Jersey, she lives in New York City and works on the digital team at Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. And some links are available at jacwaters.com.
Thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I am very happy to be here. It's very strange. I haven't been back since I was on staff here. So special thank you tonight to all the staff. Hi, Jane. All the staff past and present, because it is really nice to remember everyone I knew here, and I'm sure everyone that's here now is doing an equally amazing job. I am your leader, and I can't answer without considering the insipidness of your need for instruction and cataloging it within my list of what'll work to get through a day with you. The gold crowns the green, even in these trembling daffodils. And I know you love me and you love one another, but I only love you because I love my contempt. Here, your new skills, and there, fleece vest with 1/4 zip. You've learned every lover seeks the other's inspection, that each may tell the encouraging story of a life properly inspected. For now, let's all love my contempt. Don't ever mistake our fun events and my fun face. You're not full till everyone else goes hungry. He says we never paid attention to bells, never needed to. Our military operates only through the mail. There are 24 lessons that take 2 years to study. If a student doesn't realize she's unfolding, there isn't much we can do. We'd like to give the lessons for nothing, but we have a growth on our ribs, and the only way the doctors can get it is to saw through 6 feet of brick. Love feels like all the senses you use during the day relax, and other senses begin to misanthropically surface. That we don't want. That's an experience of deprivation, which leads to loitering. I don't really need this. Should I put it back? No. Take its photo. She was speaking in a false whisper. To open a store, you first make a list of all the money you're going to lose. Then you start to lose it and feel right on track. It says you were grabbed emotionally. That's not quite it either, and I have to be honest, you guys, I'm seeing a lot of complicated ideas out there. You might say it's just me conflating ideas and opinions, but that piece of paper your foot just totaled fell from a table that widens whenever we reach across it. And if too much has happened and you've talked too much about it, you have to say, never a dull moment, and with that, show you regret talking about anything that has ever happened. While inside you ride like the wind on a horse wet with sweat, the wind also wet with its own sweat. The wind winds up and sends a roaring gust through the stall, knocking horses to their sides and humans to their knees. And I bet you're asking yourself, where do we go from here? What's next? Well, there ought to be a set of kids' measuring tools where units get larger as the child abandons the church, the yard, the gully where the fern grass grows. As the child abandons executive business principles, counting cars with foreign license plates, visits to the child section where everything is soft, angrily outgrowing softness, binding oneself in hard furnitures, declaring practicality in hardness, while meeting conspiratorially as two colleagues unspooling minute after minute of appropriate conversation, outdoing each other, rolling it out decisively like a truck printing dashed white lines, slow sign on its tail. Just two collegial enemies enduring the false conspiracy of the shared umbrella on a wild windy night in the Houlihan's parking lot as the child's portion grows. There should be ritual abandonment of shoes and socks whenever the church bells sound. Churches shouldn't get to agitate the air with their incessant bells, nor should they release fragrances with every flip and flop of the door. I shouldn't have to duck my head inside my t-shirt every time I see some kid's parents. You should be able to reserve picnic tables by turning them upside down and throwing tomato paste cans. The park should restrict access to shoes with clear soles. We ought to be able to drink water all over each other. We should express longings and yearnings in the pietà position, looking down at the depth of the hope we don't have. And then there should be voices raised in complaint. There should be one local mom who breaks in to tell everyone to cut the shit and say it's time to say F you to the people who haven't yet helped us. Let's say F you now, so they're scared about not having helped us. Let's say cut the shit and F you to these big institutions meant to instruct us. Let's get a petition and circulate it to our personal connections. Because there should be an admonition so sharp, so pointed, and so precise that we're breathless at its suitability. or because there should be holes in your ideology, giant gaping tears in the garment revealing your underlying indifference. Indifference like a tattered rayon lining or silk batiste or cotton voile, casting you deep into your little recoils beside your many bitternesses, because they make sense, like everything makes sense because there's nothing else to make of it. When we come to grips, it's false grips. When we gain an insight, it's like we've filled a cart destined for dispersal by 1,000 years of legwork. Dear darling, I woke up today feeling jealous. This is not aimed at anyone, but you know, and I know, it's you. Can you see it all on your own? Can you solve it merely with hostility to its more easily solvable parts? In the show, a character says if you are angry, you are a character in someone else's story. If you get past your anger, you are the protagonist again. They gave that line to a side character, and that makes sense, like everything makes sense. Then one day you'll meet two beavers no one will ever need. Beaver 1 passes the junction, pursuant some wood to chew. Beavers must chew wood to trim their teeth, or risk teeth growing so long as to pierce their brains. Anything can happen was one of our lessons, but did anyone really learn it? You have emerged from a period of suffering, and now you're ready to prove you're not the person you once were. We counted you out, but you've pulled yourself together and are ready to take back the narrative. Because there should be a public basin, and we should be made to submerge our arms to the elbows. And there should be observers with huge pencil tips pressed into notebooks the size of king-size beds. And this is not aimed at anyone, but you know, and I know, it's you. And just two more. This is the ancestors, you and me both. I stayed a long while merely to rest some higher portion of myself. The remainder went on worrying and exceeding, racing down a corridor to beg help of the nuns, waking them to confirm they feel for me such warmth it flings them to their feet. They float toward me murmuring, and I eat of a table they prepare lovingly within my emergency. And their alarm at my distress is as a balm to me. And surely buttered slices of a thick brown loaf and a soup boiled off their garden's bounty will make me better, and through me soothe them. For though I can see their goodness, I can't see what makes them good. Can't say it's their aid, for aid is transient, and we tend to regret it the moment we accept it. I can't say it's their beauty, for they seem to live without it. Their tables set with scarred brown plastic, every place cluttered with evidence of yesterday's repast. And this feeling, I know, is just a branch of another, more resonant feeling, one that more thoroughly fills the room, its existence somehow superior. And though I cannot yet contain it, I'm still certain it would be better off contained. For the sake of either society at large or me, I can't tell which, and won't even try. For as long as someone speaks to me, my life is not my own. I am captured in the timidity of my response, which no longer emerges automatically, but must be set in motion by a gear wheel so weakened I hesitate to position it against the others, lest they all push each other to pieces. A world ought to be clear and instructional, providing parts for each participant to sing into a harmony suitable for shelving angels in the eaves. And it ought to be vague enough to appeal to anyone searching for a strong supporting argument. Here I conflate vagueness with strength, for neither interrogates the other. And anyone arriving in their bathrobe ought to reconsider the sense that anything is so close as to be part you. And I'll be solemn if indicated, or shout the name of the city we're in with a human's way of knowing how big or small to go, raising a name in praise. For I need to be moved every day by some truly motivating verse, convincing no one of its anonymity, but hounding me like I hound, and feel it as hounding, meaning I feel like a hound, a smart, aspiring hound, and not your child given the collar, the tag, the name. Nobody took the blame, finally, and nobody would. Blame stalled like a feather in some area of unusual pressure. I have to talk like this because the faucet is on. I have to talk at least as well as a faucet. What little have we felt for one another? Let's get it all sacked up. Let's get you out of here. And I'm going to end with this. It's called A Ruse. Couldn't I just pick up or turn my hands face up? You're as good as shuffled back into that deck. And I'll miss you my whole life if I don't gather up your egregious silences and hold them to my heart, call them love and care and doting. The way you had to make consolation out of holes, all the pricks in your understanding and the sum of your uncertainty. Steering away the rays with a high block to the sun, roundhouse kick to the bagged up leaves. And anything I carry, I clasp it close. Crush its edges as I test myself with your death, which is easily replenished or overturned like any old open bowl. Thank you.
We clap again. I really liked that. Okay. Thank you. So that was wonderful. And I'm now excited to introduce you all to Marie Macari, whose breathtaking collection, Amerigun, grapples with the memory of lost loved ones, rediscovering the power of her poetic voice as her speaker revives the voices of those she seeks to both cherish and at times challenge. From Now We Begin to Know Each Other Again, which is a poem in the collection. Then there's three lines that I wanted to highlight that I thought were really beautiful. And as I'm speaking to you now, memory spring is churning in you and is made of forgiveness. And I feel like it really encapsulates the collection, which we're about to hear from. So here's a little bit about Marie Macari. She is the author of 6 books of poetry, most recently Amerigun and Heaven Beneath. Macari's first book, Ivory Cradle, won the Honickman/APR First Book Prize in 2000, chosen by Robert Creeley. With Carrie Salerno, she edited Lit from Inside, 40 Years of Poetry from Alice Jane's Books. Her poetry and essays have been widely published in magazines such as the Iowa Review, Field, and APR. So now we have Marie Macari.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Just tell me about the sound. Am I good? Okay. All right. I want to thank Poets House for inviting me and to say how happy I am to read with these amazing poets and writers. And so my book, Amerigun, is... it's about my brother's death. My brother shot himself over 40 years ago. And it's also about our gun culture. There's always got to be that depressing poet in the... All right, I'm going to check the time. Okay. I checked the time, but I'd have to add 12 minutes to that, and I'm not sure my brain can do that right now. All right. My brother tells me, and this poem is in my brother's voice. My brother tells me of the slamming door. That first Christmas of my death, I thought maybe you, of all people, might hear me. I stayed near, hoping I could tell you it was an accident, a stupid joke. I longed to make amends, to explain how there's no magic in death, only how fast it came. Then the saturation of grief soaking me, the living trying to haul me back to mother, to father, to mother, father. The earth summoning me, the busy streets of the old neighborhood, yards full of plastic and metal, and beyond that, webs of trees like intermediaries, lifting and bowing, humming, moaning, me wanting, I don't know what. Not my body, not that, but something. Sister. I never saw the door opening before it slammed shut behind me. I only felt a sharp breeze, a gasp escaping flesh, a smell of sorrow. Not then could speak I or cry out. And with no understanding, I crossed over. The train speeds above the East River, lights from bridges, cars, apartments, an onslaught of red, green, and gold, such stars of the heavenly earth exploding through sooty windows. Once on Dad's boat, we all jumped off and swam to the beach and then back against the current, and I saw you tiring, frightened, and swam with you till Dad hauled us back on board by our wrists, cold and dripping. It's that moment of panic and weakness that finds me sometimes, and then the lights go out and no buoyancy, the train slipping underground again in Manhattan. These days, I accompany the dying as if I'm not traveling the same distance, as if I could hold myself apart as I do now from you, no longer waiting for you to catch your breath, treading, 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 dear brother. I begin with my disbelief. I ask my younger brother who went before me to otherness, at any moment might I pull at a fine thread of myself and unravel. Meanwhile, invisible arms lift and carry me along the passage. I tell him I'm sorry for how little I remember, as if our childhood is boxed and stored in our old house where for years our parents lived in the presence of his empty room. I wonder about his children who were never born and have gone on without us, without an infant's skin-on-skin portal into our world. And I bring up the night he was shot in a bar just a month before his death, when in the hospital I asked, "You learned your lesson, right?" I meant no more guns. Yes, he said, but he meant more guns. 40 years since his death, and I still want something that will make sense. Instead, from the moment he shot himself, I see an explosion, guns everywhere, rampaging boys and men. How can I explain to him what's happened? That now, if a gun's image floats even briefly through us, someone dies. So there's some blatantly political poems. And there's the title, Amerigun. There's a kind of character, Amerigun, in the book. Amerigun meets with the children. Unexpectedly, and who could have guessed, all the dead children show up, and the measure of them, the sheer number, is oceanic. They come as if washed ashore. They come holding flags, baseballs, ice cream cones, books, dolls, Skittles, toys, guns. Toy guns. And the rocket's red glare, thoughts and prayers. Oh, let me stop now and say what I truly mean. Amerigun, you're a murder machine. In Dad's papers, I find my brother's death certificate, August 13th, 2023. Mom and I sorting through an envelope stuffed with papers Dad saved, birth and death certificates of his parents, uncles, grandmother, his uncle's 1903 baptismal record in Italian from a church on Thompson Street. How many people Dad took care of, I say, before removing the yellow folded paper that might be an invitation or a letter, but is my brother's death certificate. And there the words, contact gunshot wound to head, shot himself playing Russian roulette. And I think of the ways that might mean accident. What did you think, my mother snaps when I show her. He was stupid, she says, after years of not talking about him. Stupid, fooling around. And I think how at 24, he felt invincible, but maybe also in some remote place wanting to die, hiding some cells of despair as anyone feels, even when I'm happy, when I'm grateful, chasing time, wanting to live. Still, there's a dust-sized yaw, something missing. And my mother is angry that I forced on her the blunt instrument of memory, and I am ashamed to know I have believed so many versions of the truth. But the day is warm. The sky a blue, still spilling in all directions. What is there to do but think I am here, where great oaks tower above the house, and I want to be here. And I fold it up again, and she says, "You keep these," and pushes the envelope toward me. Crescendo. I ask you what kinds of music you listen to, and if music was as important to you as to me. Sometimes I still sing when no one's around. A hidden unspooling is how it feels. Remember, I wanted to be a singer? Everything is music. Trees emptying in wind, the cold sheet around me at night, deeper than sleep, the song awaiting. You were a music, and then a staccato leap, a crescendo leading to the single bullet, then distant, unbearable silence. So this poem, sort of a companion to the poem about the death certificate. When I was writing this book, these things, I found them, but they found me. This is about my father. I didn't know this. Everybody else knew it, but I didn't know it. And my father hired a private detective after my brother died to be sure that we had the real story. So the first part of this is just a quote from the report. Public Investigation Service, March 1984. The detectives who responded have informed us that while the case is still open, it is going to be closed and marked accidental death. It is their belief that Edward was not familiar with the revolver, as in spinning the cylinder, one shell automatically goes into the chamber when it is spun counterclockwise. They feel that he might have been fooling around, making believe that he was going to play Russian roulette, and did not realize that a live round was in the barrel of the revolver. The report finds me on August 20th, 2024, kept by my father in his desk for decades, then by my sister. A tiny vestige of that night, as if I'd fallen on my knees and brushed off some stone ledge, searching fossil layers. My brother now, the fragment that imagines the whole animal. Then my cousins tell me that he and his friends watched Deer Hunter that night. Oh. Never mind. I want to tell him, remembering that scene, the last piece of the puzzle falling in place. Never mind, brother, how we turn toward death, or what close calls we've had, or how something has always saved me, like when he drove my things north after I left my husband, who twice threatened to have me committed for not agreeing to be his secretary. Eddie driving the U-Haul from North Carolina to New York. Mom and I behind in my car, driving till the lights of the city rose, and I almost laughed, seeing it was possible to come home, to begin again, believing then almost anything could be fixed, except maybe blind ignorance, or a wrong turn, or the breath of the unknown hoarding a secret it was dying to tell. All right, two more. This is a short one. Crossing. Like sounds of whales clicking, calling underwater. Also diffused, unfamiliar glow. Is there light that does not leave us? That skims us like water and drips a pool, a halo around our feet? This is the last poem in the book. It's called Peconic Bay Meditation, and the you in the poem is my brother. Here, where the slim sash of lichen blends into its tree and like you, is nearly invisible and so quiet, I only ever notice the tree's wide trunk and its branches hinged with green, but not the tree's patience. I feel you near as I walk the beach searching for horseshoe crabs. As kids, we'd see them mating in late spring, the smaller male crab on top of the larger female, those prehistoric and medicinal beings armored in muddy gold, whose blood can save us, though we will be the end of them. Let's say we had everything a child needed or could want. We had bodies we understood as indestructible. We had spiders in the windows and sweet summer corn piled on a platter. We had stories passed solemnly and a peach tree that never grew more than one peach every few years. Now I have buffalo-shaped clouds of afternoons and the kind of blue that feels like I could simply walk into it, slide inside and be wondered, livened, just thinking of my life. I'm happy. This life. How did it happen? May the horseshoe crabs go on unbothered, unchanged with their healing blood, those little tanks of the bay with their bayonets aimed at no one. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really beautiful to hear out loud. The sounds were amazing and just very touching poems. So up next, and I would ask you to clap again, but I felt like that was weird, so we'll just clap at the end. This is my first time doing this, so... but all applause well deserved. So there's an essay in Michael Klein's latest essay collection, Happiness Ruins Everything, called People Are Funny, which immediately caught my eye as I was perusing the book. And in this essay, Klein insists that he's not a particularly funny writer, which is too bad because he writes, I love funny anything, but especially funny people. And I hate to say, and I hate to disagree, but I think that Michael Klein is a wildly funny writer with a wry bent that immediately won me over. As a prose writer, his charm, wit, and impeccable timing shine in this new collection. This is the kind of person and writer that I think Michael is from his essay, The Money Job. He has never lost track of the ability to recognize beauty in even the most mundane encounters and how beauty enlarges the world when it gets entangled with language. So let's give it up for Michael Klein. I'm just going to read the bio real quick. He's an author of 6 books of poetry and a 5-time finalist and 2-time winner of the Lambda Literary Award. He's also the author of 2 books of autobiography, and his work has appeared in Poetry, Paris Review, American Poetry Review, Tin House, Fence, and many other publications. He is a member of the writing faculty at Goddard College MFA Program for Writers, Sarah Lawrence College, Binghamton University, and Hunter College, as well as more than 2 decades of teaching summers at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, Michael Klein.
Thank you. I have none of those jobs anymore, so if any of you have work for me, I'm open. I'm open to work. I like to work. Jane. I love you, Jane. It's so nice to see you. I'm having a moment here. I haven't been to New York. I live in Newport, Rhode Island, don't ask. And I haven't been here to New York for a while. I haven't been to Poets House for longer than that. This is a book of devotions. I'm going to read you the introduction so you get an idea of what's happening, and then I will read from the book. There's an epigram, sort of a famous one. Piglet sidled up to Pooh from behind. Pooh, he whispered. Yes, Piglet? Nothing, said Piglet, taking Pooh's paws. I just wanted to be sure of you. I love that quote. When I stopped drinking 40 years ago, I was told that as soon as I stopped throwing up, I had better get a sponsor. Someone who had been sober a while and could act as my shepherd through a new mystery called sobriety. The word itself, sobriety, sounded like something like grace. I had a lot of sponsors over the years, and each of them gave me something singular having to do with devotion, not to each other, but to the same idea. Is this wisdom or self-pity? The love I have known is two people looking not at each other, but in the same direction, wrote Frank Bedart. I have known this kind of love too. Each sponsor I've had in the more than 20 years of sponsorship gave rise to a moment that could only be called transcendent. Something they said or did that was so tender, so sudden, and so generous as to be breathtaking. Grace falls. Steve was my first sponsor, and he had the distinction of being in a long-term relationship with a guy he paid for sex. Of course, the arrangement intrigued me, not the money part so much as the falling in love part. How did that happen? How did love happen? What hinge connects lust to love when the hustler's eyes that had always been open during a kiss slowly begin to close? Steve happened so long ago and only lasted one summer. I can't remember how we drifted apart, and I don't know if he's even still alive. I have been shamefully afraid to find out because he, like a lot of men I knew in the late 80s, had AIDS, but was for the most part healthy, making plans based on living, not dying. Once in the August of that year, Steve and a small group of us went to Reese Park, the iconic gay beach in New York. I set my towel down to Steve's, and we were lying on our stomachs talking about the book, The Marriage of Cadmus and Harmony, Roberto Classio's visionary and encyclopedic reading of Greek mythology. In the silence that followed our enthusiasm for the book, Steve touched my shoulder. What? I said, waiting for the afterthought. Oh, nothing. I just wanted to keep in touch. A few years later, another transcendent moment when another sponsor, the beautiful late Peter Baird of puppetry fame, dropped everything he was doing to drive me to New York to Provincetown because I didn't have a car anymore. The poet Jean Valentine, my closest friend at the time, had sold me her car for $1, but it had no second gear. It was a gift to me to wear... And I took it. It was a gift to get out of New York. But the day before I was scheduled to leave, as I walked to where I had parked the car in Riverside Park, holding the new license plates like an offering to the god of safe travel, I discovered the car had been stolen. I called Peter, and Peter was there the next day. And when we got to the Cape, the first thing we did was walk the length of Commercial Street to where in the dark, because Peter said night is where you see everything, because it gives you the soul of a place. And while those journeys with Peter and Steve were singular and indelible, most of the other people, my God squad, as another sponsor once called it, were artists who, whether I knew them well or met them only briefly, have had a reverberating effect on my curiosity. I watched how they lived. I listened to what they said. I shared in their successes. Like someone who wants that ineffable something long-term sobriety promises. I wanted what they had. Artists who seemed to fall in my path through my education. And in that moment, thinking about the God Squad, I realized I've never acknowledged those people in writing or what it was that made me wonder not only about the world of making art, but what it was that I could offer that world. Something that I knew it wasn't going to be children. The years of my training in acting, music, dance, and writing all culminating in my becoming someone who found the wonderment that comes with writing poems. So this is my book about what it has meant to me to stay curious and devoted to certain people, places, and things, and how they all helped set out a path based on not on logic, but on imagination. There's an epigraph that begins the book, "Wonder is becoming a rare emotion." Charles Simic. Michael Jeter was an actor. I had the strangest, he was, if Michael Jeter, his most famous role was playing the drag queen who gives a telegram in The Fisher King to Robin Williams was in the movie. I'm not sure it was and he sings a song from Jim. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay. Never mind. It's in the essay, sort of. I had the strangest dream last night about my old friend Michael Jeter, who died in 2003. We were walking on a city street, a hard to recognize city street because it wasn't New York, and I haven't been to any other city long enough to dream about it, except the city of Newport, Rhode Island, which is where I dream now and sometimes live. Michael was walking a few feet in front of me, and with each step, the sky was getting darker, and some lights started to come on from out of vague storefronts with windows with nothing in them except stacks of construction paper. In the dream, it felt like I was with Michael. It had begun with him in some undefinable somewhere, but as the dream kept getting gradually darker, I was dream thinking that maybe we weren't together, that maybe I was following him, or he had suddenly appeared in front of me at some beginning of the dream that I either don't remember or never actually had. Eventually, how long is walking in a dream? How long the haunted boulevard? Michael took some steps down into what seemed like a bar. There was a name I can't remember of the doorway that sounded like the name of a bar. If I owned a bar, I'd call it 86th or Sinister Wisdom. I read these two really fascinating things about dreams that you don't read in a dream. You can't read in a dream, and you can't tell the time. And I was thinking, was there ever a dream that I had? And that's true. I've never read it, except, anyway, I thought that was fascinating. Whether it's true or not, it's, just one more thing that may or not be true in a world that may or not be true. What a time, huh? What's true? It said like it was always death and taxes, in case you're interested. Okay? That's it. Michael walked in, and I walked in after him, and inside was a long hallway of concrete figures resembling people sitting at a counter. I was curiously terrified, and I took a seat next to Michael while the bartender asked me what I wanted to drink. I actually woke myself up in the middle of answering the bartender. "I'll have a whiskey and soda, and don't be stingy." The original line from the film Anna Christie, starring Greta Garbo. What I remembered upon waking was, "Give me a whiskey, ginger ale on the side, and don't be stingy, baby." I first met Michael Jeter in New York on the West Side at a weekly meeting of people who were trying to stay sober. He was so funny that his humor seemed more than enough to like about him without having to know anything more about him. And being funny is something I like about a person I can catch one-handed. Michael was an actor, but at the time, like most actors in New York, he was making a living at something else, which happened to be the same thing I was making a living at, which was working nights as a word processor in a prestigious New York law firm. Michael would call me every now and then and soon enough ask me out, what I could only think of as a date, because I could already tell he was attracted to me more than I was attracted to him. I completely loved his mind, though, and maybe I should have let that love spread out and move in the direction that his body was in. But I was too new to sobriety to know what I was feeling half the time. We had dinner somewhere. On the way back to his apartment afterwards, we were talking about someone we both knew who wasn't very bright. And Michael said, he's dumber than a box of hair, which was very close to the funniest thing I have ever heard anybody say. It was so funny that I fell in a heap at a crosswalk at Riverside Drive. God, he was funny, which also made him angelic. At his apartment, we talked about books we loved, and he turned me on to Nabokov simply by pointing out what he believed was the finest sentence in literature from Lolita. My very photographic mother died in a freak accident. Picnic, lightning. Billy Collins did not make that up, okay? Which, when I was there, and save for a packet of warmth in the darkest past, I had hot flashes during Michael's reading of that to me and probably should have kissed him right then and there, but I left. And then I only saw him one more time before he moved to California. He'd gotten a role in the new Tommy Tune musical Grand Hotel, based on the Greta Garbo classic. In an extraordinary demonstration of kindness, Michael got tickets for a big group of us to see the show, and then took all of us out to dinner, and later that year would win the Tony Award for his performance and gave an acceptance speech that remains one of the most moving acceptance speeches ever given by an actor. It's on YouTube if you want to check it out. It's extraordinary. It's about being a recovering alcoholic, but it's very open and honest. Then he left New York and eventually died from AIDS in California. I remember being so angry at his death, sad of course, but mad at thinking, true or not, that if he had only stayed in New York and HIV negative, Michael wouldn't have seroconverted and eventually died from the disease. On top of that, I never saw Michael as a California kind of guy, but a New Yorker through and through. His humor and intelligence were too radiant to ever be appreciated by people in the West. His one performance of a homeless drag queen in the film The Fisher King, delivering a telegram to an office worker while belting out an hysterical seminal version of Rose's Turn from Gypsy, was Jeter genius, and still my favorite image of him. Pure joy, pure nobody else in the world like him. As I'm writing this, the sky is darkening the way it did in the weird dream about him, and I've been trying to figure it out all day, that strange way a dream you remember keeps remembering you in daylight, what it all meant, the concrete, the dark, what did it mean, Michael of all people, to begin with. But like every dream, the meaning, the secret of the dream is lost the more you try to figure it out. Michael came to visit me in a city neither of us had ever been to, and I woke myself up laughing about a drink order, wishing he had come with me out of the dream, into the light he had disappeared into so long ago. So there's some weird stuff in here in terms of, like, I'm going to read one of them just to give you an idea, because the book is it's a hybrid. I hate the word hybrid, but it's kind of a hybrid. Loren's Heart. In 1939, when my mother was 7 years old, the lyricist Loren's Heart gave her a photograph of himself on which he had inscribed in midnight blue ink, for Catherine Jacqueline from Loren's Heart, whose name will probably be forgotten by the time she is able to read this. Hart had been a friend of my grandfather's, a vaudevillian. I remember reading the inscription for the first time and thinking what an extraordinary thing it was for someone to say to a child, as if childhood held the same kind of unpredictability and loneliness that fame did, and that my mother could actually understand all that. After my mother died in 1977, I inherited the photograph and sold it to an autograph dealer on 18th Street for drinking money. In the museum of the saddest things I've ever done, that may be the saddest. It felt like I was making fun of beauty. Jean Valentine, along with Adrienne Rich, who figure prominently in this book, were my mentors, some friends, mentors. They kept me in poetry even when I wanted to escape, which was many times. Adrienne wrote me a letter once and said, I said, I want to try other things. I'm sick of this shit. I'm not smart enough. I mean, whatever. And she said, do whatever you want, but you have to stay. You have to keep that. You had to keep poetry. No matter how it comes to you, you just had to keep it in your life. And I did, because she told me to. I did what she told me to do. That's what we did in those days. That's what people who wanted to be poets did. They did what they were told. They weren't looking for awards. They weren't looking for recognition. They were looking for beauty, and they did what they were told. I did what I was told, and then I drank. Jean Valentine. I don't think I ever read this poem. There's a poem that she actually wrote for me that appeared in a book that I didn't know about. I don't think I ever read this poem that she dedicated to me until it appeared in one of her books, and even then it never came up in conversation. It was anonymous. Once in a while, and in celebration of nothing in particular, Jean would ask me to close my eyes, and she would place a gift in my open hand every time, a variation on the same theme, the earth in miniature. Her first gift was a wooden marble with a tiny continent hand-painted in green. Her next, a planet carefully etched with glitter, a Christmas ornament. There are 6 or 7 of these worlds that I've held in my hands over the years, thanks to Jane. But the last gift she gave me before she died in 2020 wasn't a world. It was a small wooden horse on wheels. Small worlds may have been harder to find that month, or it may have been Jean's deteriorating memory that made it hard for her to remember the theme to her giving. And it threw me at first, the horse not being another world. But perhaps the horse represented something, reminded Jean of my once disheveled life, those years when I lived on the racetrack and took care of horses. While Jean's gifts told me a lot about who she was, there were other times with Jean that transcended anything I knew about her, arriving usually in the form of something she said in ordinary conversation. She was one of the few poets I've ever known who could sound in everyday speech like poetry, which sounds pretentious, but Jean was never pretentious. Once at a Quaker meeting house in Brooklyn, where we were giving a reading from an anthology of poems I had just published about the early days of AIDS, Jean and I were looking at the crescent moon through a window on the staircase landing. She said, "It's shaped like that to keep luck from spilling out." Another time, one August, as we walked down Pearl Street in Provincetown towards the bay, shining in the middle distance, she said, "Everything's sad except what's real." Occasionally, she could be disarmingly funny. Not more than occasionally. In Provincetown, again, during a weekend called Fantasia Fair, where transvestites sometimes bring their wives down to town for an annual convention, Jean said, "Do you think people will think I'm a man?" Over the years of our friendship, so funny, in utter, like innocence. "No, Jean, not dressed in a woolen suit. They will not." Once in summer, one winter, I brought her a new television set. With a video player after the one that she had conked out. She was surprised to receive such an extravagant gift, especially from the likes of me, who was broke most of the time. A week or two later, Jean called, her voice in the key of panic. "Mikey, I love it, but everything's in black and white." "What do you mean black and white?" "Even the movies that were made in color are coming through in black and white." To which I joked in all seriousness, "Of course they're in black and white, Jean. The movies know it's you, the dream barker, the poet, sitting in a viewing booth." When I went to Jean's to see what was happening with the TV, she slipped in a video of Singing in the Rain into the mouth of the haunted contraption. I don't know if the musical was any better in black and white, but Jean seemed to like it just the same. It looks like a news report in the form of a musical. True story. It's all true, by the way. Every single word in this book. It is. Every single thing is true. A couple, how am I doing here? A couple more. One short. I'm okay, right? Like a couple, okay. How some people, I never keep time, so sorry. And I brought this up thinking, oh, I'll keep that, and I haven't looked at it. It was called How Some People Happen. Steve Jobs designed every Apple product to fall asleep so he wouldn't have to turn it off. He was afraid of death. Willie Smith was a largely, hugely successful African-American fashion designer who made clothes that were big enough to swim in, his signature style. Anybody who wore something designed by Willie Smith was making a statement about being hidden. This was fashion in the late 70s. The reason Willie Smith made clothes so big was because he was sexually abused as a child. Willie Smith came into his artistic being by reaching back to trauma and retrieving the thing that could have been prevented. If the perpetrator couldn't see him, how could the perpetrator touch him? Willie Smith made clothes people got lost in because Willie Smith got lost in his own people and didn't know where his body was living inside his own clothing, or where his body stopped and another body began. Stephen Sondheim lived next door to Katharine Hepburn, who complained about the racket he was making on his grand piano, the music which would later become the show company. To appease Hepburn, Sondheim switched over to an electric piano, which is why the score for Company sounds so different than the other scores Sondheim wrote. It's brassy because he took the grand piano out of it. The next may be wrong because, like most of my thinking, I can't remember how I know it. But Gaudi's Roman Catholic Sagrada Familia Church came to its eventual design only after the architect took its first model of the building and turned it upside down. The design building on the campus of Goddard College looks the way it does because it was built from the ground up without any architectural plan whatsoever. How does it stay up? Nobody knows, or they're not telling you. A bowler hat is rolling through the woods. That's all they had at first, but the Coen brothers knew there had to be a bowler hat rolling through the woods. So they made a film called Miller's Crossing to figure out who was wearing that hat and how it got into the woods. They moved out from a central image and wrote a screenplay. From an interview with an inmate on death row San Quentin, which took place on the night before he was to be executed. Question: what are you going to miss? Answer: Coltrane. When Maya Angelou was 7 years old, she was raped by her mother's boyfriend, who then shot to death by a group of family members. Instead of feeling relief or that his killing could somehow balm her trauma, Angelou became more traumatized, feeling responsible for killing the man who had raped her. And because she had told somebody how she was raped, she thought her voice had the power to kill. Maya Angelou stopped talking for 20 years. Then she wrote, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. The artificial leg that the Bible salesman swipes in Flannery O'Connor's Good Country People means nothing until, at the story's climax, the entirety of the leg's meaning has accumulated. Beverly Bentley, once married to Norman Mailer and the mother of his children, once dated Miles Davis, which, according to Beverly, who told me this story, was more than a casual fling. When books about Miles Davis's life were published, Beverly skimmed them all to see if she was mentioned. And when she couldn't find anything about the relationship, she called Davis and asked why. Because you're white, he said. It's all true. It's all true. Linda Berry. Do people know who Linda Berry is? The cartoonist, theater maker? She's fantastic. If you don't know her, check her out. She's written a lot of books. She's written a book about writing called, God, what the hell? And she's an amazing illustrator. I mean, just cartoonist. She was girlfriends for a long time with Matt Groening and Iris Glass, actually. Anyway, we met at Goddard. She was a visiting writer. And this was the experience that I had with her. And this is an image. You can't see it, but she took one of my poems. She read my book of poetry. It was my first book of poetry. I think it all had been published or something. But she presented me the next morning with a calligraphy. She had written the poem out and she illustrated it, and she handed it to me at breakfast, and it's framed. My two absolute precious things that I have are that, and I have a letter from William Maxwell, who is my favorite writer, talking about the book that I had sent him, which he liked, which was good. Because if he hadn't liked it, it wouldn't be framed on my wall. The image you were looking at is from the summer of 2011 when Linda Berry was a visiting artist at Goddard College's low residency program. I like to think of this image as her illuminated reaction to a poem called Living from my second book, Then We Were Still Living. She presented it to me one morning after a day or two of her gig. A gig, she thought, in a hurried misreading of the offer letter, meant a 1-week fellowship and not the 2-day give a reading workshop and leave proposal we usually give writers to come to Vermont. All we wanted, and we all wanted to hire her permanently, never mind kick her off campus after a week. I knew of Linda for years, the way some people know other writers by name, or with the lingering curiosity that stops just short of actually making a point to get to their work. Besides, she was mostly known for being a cartoonist, and I'm not open enough to cartoons. In the same way, I find it difficult to sit through an animated film, even when some of them seem to be brilliantly made. I always think of this great thing the playwright Christopher Shin once said about movies in 3D. I'm paraphrasing here, but something to the effect of, when I'm watching a movie, I don't suddenly have a desire to have things on the screen get closer to me. I watched everyone fall in love with Linda that night at Goddard in the iconic Hayborn Theater, her side trips into music and poetry, and afterwards I began searching for everything she had ever written. How can you resist someone pointing out through impromptu song stylings that Robert Frost stopping by the woods on a snowy evening scans the same way as Hernando's Hideaway from the musical The Pajana Game? Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, and etc., etc. In the 71 years I have been most of the time a decent person, I've also been lucky enough to be around other persons whose very presence is so authentic and so surprising and so beyond most people that I lose sense of my own self and vanish momentarily into theirs. And I'm lucky that I've been able to hold people like this close enough to consider them friends, or even close enough stretches out over long distances and times, which is how I quickly came to know Linda. I thought nearly instantly that we'd become good friends, stay in touch, maybe even share our work with each other, collaborate. But that didn't happen, at least not yet anyway. But every so often, Linda's particular way of being has prompted me to try and get in touch with her again, even though a message might never get read. In the end, it doesn't matter. Her one act of startling generosity on a winter morning in Vermont is to me the very essence of enough. Two short ones, and then I'm out of here. And the lovely Donna will be here to read. And thank you, Donna, by the way, for inviting me to read, and thank you, Poets House. And thank you all for coming. That's nice. 4 versions of a night in a movie. Some movies get the night better than life. Other things that movies get better are betrayal, crime, and slapstick. And sex, probably, except for theoretical sex, which life gets better. I'm thinking of the movie night we enter for the dazzling and famous opening shot in one take of A Touch of Evil, and Janet Leigh and the white of the Mexican street leading to the American border that counterpoints the falling of the night on a car's trunk that is holding a bomb, which is the only other character at the start of Touch of Evil. Or I'm thinking of the claustrophobic night inside the cottage from The Miracle Worker, where Annie Sullivan has taken Helen Keller to bring her into the more combustible world by removing her from the other more broken world where her family broods like a family in an O'Neill play in black and white, a night that swings from rambunctiousness to lullaby. Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird. Or I'm thinking of the brother and sister John and Pearl from Night of the Hunter, who finally set themselves free from the tyrannical false god played by Robert Mitchum as they drift on a river in a rowboat making its way to a waiting Lillian Gish in a night of stars that look as if they're reflected by the water onto the sky and not the other way around. And Pearl is singing something she might be making up called Pretty Fly, whose otherworldly beauty sounds like a song from the future. And I am thinking of the last night, the best night in the pantheon of movie nights. Donna Masini is walking through a dream trees of music in Nights of Cabiria with every known expression for a human face, exalting her into a surprising buonasera from a stranger, and exalted again, led through a winding dream to a threshold of a most specific longing. And the light that is always anonymous, for that is what the night brings, every anonymity, like stray cats that know how to get the story written, and the dark that turns anyone into the sleepwalker who has stayed awake by looking hard into the everlasting. Book of Names. And this is it, the last one. I managed to make it a block and a half to the gas station for cigarettes, but I wasn't too sure about walking back home. I was still a little wobbly since the knee had only been replaced that Tuesday. And so I got an Uber after the cigarettes and told the driver to please give me a minute to get into his car. I've just had surgery. Of course, he said. And of course, he said, of course. Because as I'd soon learn, he had gotten a new knee himself. He knew how it was. What if we could live in a world where people knew, no matter what kind of person crossed their path, how it was? But what made you come out of the house? I smoke, I said. And then when he went into that old saw about smoking and its richly varied horrors, adding, you'll save money too, his plea that I should quit. Addicts don't care about how much the drugs cost, I told him. He said, you should pray to get your addiction stopped. Pray to have the next cigarette you smoke taste like shit. That settled me in a way, the stranger sitting up front, Paul, as he became known, looking out for me. Paul wasn't preachy or brainwashed. His words came through with an assuring wave of humility. An islander, I thought. And as I was about to get out of the car, I noticed an open journal of handwritten notes wedged between his seat and where I was sitting. I don't know if this is yours or maybe a fair left it, I said, handing it to him. The word fair felt odd as it was leaving my mouth, but I also call a refrigerator an icebox most of the time. Thank you, he said. That's my book of prayers. What kind of prayers? I asked him. Prayers for people I've picked up that could use some help. I could put your name down if you want. Oh, please do, I said. That would be great. I wanted to say, please do. I could really use some prayers, but didn't want to sound like anybody but myself at that particular moment. And as I watched him add my name to the others, which I imagined nightly filling his book of prayers, I was struck by the same thought I get when I'm inside moments that feel ordained, a little to the side of life, similarly lit like this moment. The thought, I can be happy now with just this one and only. Just this. At last, I found the man with the book. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, everybody, for clapping again. Last but not least, I am incredibly honored to introduce Donna Masini. For the past 2 years, I was privileged to learn from Donna as a student in Hunter's MFA program, where she's taught poetry since the program's inception. One thing about Donna is that she would never make her students do anything that she herself would not do. I remember last spring, Donna sat at the head of the table in the James Wright room, as she normally would do, and said, "Did you all know that tears of sadness contain 20 to 25% more protein than those you shed chopping onions?" Never had us students expected that this interesting fact would become a crown jewel in Donna's collection. Did you find everything you were looking for? But how could we not, given her insistence upon us keeping a good notebook? Scraps of life from here and there that might otherwise be missed are enlarged and loved in Donna's latest poems. Another thing about Donna is that she's always right. It is evident that in this tender, intimate, and playful collection, that all good poems begin in the notebook, track the mind in action, and beckon the reader inside. Now here's the bio. Donna Masini's new book, Did You Find Everything You Were Looking For?, will be out in spring 2026. It actually just came out. Her other books include 4:30 Movie, Turning to Fiction, That Kind of Danger, and About Yvonne, which is a novel. Her poems have appeared in The New Yorker, Best American Poetry, American Poetry Review, Yale Review, Paris Review, Poetry, et al. A recipient of the NEA, and NYFA, and a Pushcart Prize, she teaches at Hunter College. Donna.
Charlie. Charlie is a wonderful poet. And I'm sorry to see them leave. Well, here you are. I'm so happy to be here, reading with you guys, two of whom I've known for a long time. I've only just met. My cousins are here tonight. Francis, I feel like the Ed Sullivan Show. Francis and Debbie are here. I think I have cousins on Zoom somewhere. I'm going to read you some poems. Please let me know if you can't hear me because I'm getting over a cold. All right. There's a lot of questions in this book. Is there anything else I can help you with? Can you help me find the medication for my mother's dementia and dress shoes that don't hurt my feet? Will you go to Trader Joe's and pick up the red onions I forgot and remind me to bring my cloth bag next time? Can you tell me why much of the plastic we recycle is dumped into landfills? I would like to understand how a credit card-sized mosaic of microplastic ends up in our bodies every day. Is this true? And why I spent half an hour this morning playing a 37-second clip of Sylvia Plath laughing. Is there a word for when you're leaning over the stove waiting for coffee and the previous night's dream keeps almost appearing? Can we say things happened that only happened in our minds? I've had dreams that feel more real than vast stretches of 7th grade, and who's to say, given the many times I've read To the Lighthouse, Mrs. Ramsey is any less real than my cousin Aldo? Is there a name for what you feel when you look into a store window and don't recognize yourself? And why do the tears you shed in emotion, like when your mother gropes for a word you know is daughter and wants to know if she is dead, contain 20 to 25% more protein than those you shed chopping onions? A Vietnamese monk told his audience in Vermont that if they were very, very mindful with each bite, they would be present not only in that moment, which was decades ago, but would, in fact, experience the tomato they were eating back to the dirt, the vine, the sun, as it poured into it back inside the moment of its creation. Is there a word for that? What would I have to chew to be able to laugh on the phone with my sister again? Can you help me with that? To the woman in window 8 at the DMV. You all know what the DMV is, yeah? Okay. I'm sorry I didn't have what you call the original copy of my birth certificate. I did bring my official infant footprints. They're nothing like my feet now, but it did say certificate of birth. Yes, it was a Xerox. Tell me, how can an original be a copy? Maybe you had a disappointing lunch, couldn't find a parking spot, don't even drive. I don't drive. You could see that from my expired learner's permit. I was only asking for a real ID. What is real, window 8? It seems to me nothing could be more real than my 2 3/4-inch infant foot. I am terrified of driving. I'm sorry that paying you for the useless for federal purposes non-driving ID, I saw you type in the wrong birth date. I wasn't born in 1931. You did ask me to check for accuracy. My father was born in 1931. If he hadn't died 4 years ago, he might have made you laugh. But maybe he'd have been just another old guy at your window waiting to die. A few years before he died, my father had to stop driving. That was terrible. There were many terrible things that happened in my life, Montaigne says, and most of them never happened. I would like to read more Montaigne. When your father dies, I hope you'll be with him, peering into his fogging oxygen mask. I held my father's arm, thanked him for everything I hadn't thanked him for as I stomped around in my glowering adolescence. Have you tried meditation? Smoldering rage isn't good for our hearts. It's a heartbreaking world. Entropy, dirty money, they are bombing hospitals. Maybe you were imagining the 6th extinction. Even one is terrible. Have a baby anyway. I wish I had. With the right mix of genes and circumstance, you could have been my daughter. Listen, someday what will be left of us, a few teeth, pitted bones. Did you even look at my infant foot? Miraculous, isn't it? I wonder why prehistoric walls aren't covered with baby footprints. Have you seen those caves? Like giant, hand-covered wombs. The woman in your head, there are ways to stop her. Anger can mask grief. So much to be angry about. Proliferating viruses, economy, seeding, screw the DMV window 8. I wish your window had a lake view and cardinals singing their unmistakable cheer. A window needn't be a cage. The phone numbers of my dead are floating up inside me. I am not sure I agree with Montaigne. Terrible things are real, even if they happen only in our minds. I wish the birth of anything were so miraculous no one could ever bomb a hospital. I wish it'd been nicer, sooner, to my father. Suffering is a choice. If your feet hurt as you walk, the Buddhists say, think about the absence of pain in the foot that lifts. Focus on relief, you'll feel relief. We suffer so much, trapped in our windows, thinking we're looking through them. I'll never see you again, window 8. My dead friends, I'll never dial their numbers again. 2 weeks from now, when my useless, non-real ID arrives in my mailbox, I'll think of you, and I will remain always ticket 4180. On time. A 2.5-minute read. Tomorrow, my grandfather would say, not that grandfather, tomorrow, my grandfather would say when I asked him to ride my bike. Next day, I'd ask again. You said you'd ride my bike today. No, he'd say, I said tomorrow. This would go on for days. In Italian, the idea of the future is contained in the present. I ride your bike is the same as I will ride your bike tomorrow, and I am riding your bike right now. What a slippery world. Que sera, sera. Each time my mother reaches for a word, toothpaste, candle, each time I forget a noun, I see that rickety old train of thought, late again, sluggish, chugging around its... Nouns are the first to go, the doctor says to the grandmother in the sad Korean movie, whose title, I remember, is poetry. And the last? When did articles start saying things like a 6-minute read? You have 140 minutes left of this book, it says on my iPad screen. And if I put the iBook down for, say, 2 weeks, that's a way to stretch a minute. This is the 20th century, my mother exclaimed the other night. Time is running out to save the Western bumblebee, I learned today at 10:49. A short text, a 30-second plea. I am asked to rush my $27 immediately. I'm late. Here at my desk, how is it possible I am also looking up into the window of my father's hospital room? 4 years ago, watching him wave. He's just taught me to play solitaire. How is it possible I've seen only one sunrise in my life? Did you know that memory has the same root as mourn? An ounce of cocaine, the painter says, costs about 60 times more than an ounce of oil paint, but lasts only an hour, while cadmium red lasts hundreds of years. Well, time is money, as my grandfather, who had neither, would say. Out of joint, looping around, how can you finish knitting an infinity scarf? Row, 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 merrily, 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 row, merrily, row, a vicious cycle, a brief candle, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. You have 140 minutes left. Why do we say someone who's dead is late? Nobody can tell me the answer to that. In truth, I kind of don't want to know. I didn't Google it. This is the title poem. Did you find everything you were looking for? The young man at the supermarket register says. She'd found this piece of raw salmon in its plastic package, an onion, milk. But was that the right word? Doesn't to find a thing suggest it's been lost? She's trying to stop revisiting her history of losses, the heart-shaped ring her godmother gave her on Communion Day, which she'd lost in the snow on the way home from Girl Scouts. Her godmother, who'd recently died. Her cats, 4 cats. So many things she's never found. She never found what had caused the leak in the ceiling that ruined her grandfather's prayer book, what made the tumor grow in her sister's lung. She hadn't found the great love of her life. Well, she had found him. She divorced him. In truth, she's never understood what great love of your life means exactly. But she'd found, that morning, great solace when she looked up from her book to see her cat. She found that cat after the last 2 died, gazing at her with which she felt pretty sure was love, when it slipped its delicate paw into her hand. One night that cat snatched the salmon poaching in the pan. She found the word poaching, with regard to the cat and the salmon, funny. She likes to laugh. She finds it helps to laugh. It's a mystery to her she finds herself alive on a particular day after so many years picking up milk, waiting on lines. How quickly it all passes. Then you find yourself standing among the late-night shoppers, the piled-up carts and baskets, the winter dark pressing against the store windows, and this beautiful young man wanting to know. Quick choice between these two. I don't know which one to do. Okay, this one is called Midnight in the Pain Relief Aisle of CVS, Thinking About the Cloud of Unknowing. The Cloud of Unknowing is a medieval anonymous text. You'll hear like little lines about God running through the poem a little bit. Here we go. Pain ricochets around my skull like an aspirin commercial from the 60s, darting up the nasal passages, up behind the frown, the temporal bones, clutching at God like a desperate spark. He bound you to him by a chain of such longing. Ridiculous. This pressing and pressing the button for an attendant, aching jaw, temples throbbing. When did they start locking everything up? Do I need something? This man wants to know. Contact lens solution, root touch up. Where is my mind? My mother said this morning. Is Daddy dead? How did he die? Do not fret after God, my book says. Well, I do fret. I'm fretted as a guitar, picking out the same chords, arpeggios of dread, wandering 24-hour chains, rehearsing my facts, one big cloud of forgetting. There are 300 muscles in the face. The time bone, the temple is called, where our hair grays first. Why aren't the aisles marked? My God, what is that shrieking? The man doesn't work here, he says. Reconcile yourself to wait in the darkness. What did I think spiritual desert meant? Surely not that lump of nothing I was on the couch an hour ago, wielding the remote, spooning mango sorbet out of a container. It should feel, I explained to the self-checkout screen, how did I get here? Punching in my customer number, more important, what saints felt, a dreadful hunger. If you need help, the self-checkout voice is saying, todo y nada, it whispers, here in the aching all-night fluorescent. I'm going to end with something a little bit more upbeat, sort of upbeat. Clams. The man has ordered spaghetti with clam sauce. The woman is not fond of clams. In fact, she is not as fond of this man as she once was. The man begins to twirl the spaghetti around his fork, displacing several clams. He is frowning. She thinks of the expression, happy as a clam. How happy could a clam be? She tries to imagine what a clam might look like, happily swimming around the ocean with the other clams, but she can't picture this. They'd need fins or legs to even crawl. Maybe they just bob around like chunks of carrot in a soup. How happy is that? She wishes she knew what clams looked like still alive in the ocean before they were dead on someone's spaghetti. So many things she's never thought to imagine. She would ask the man, but he gets annoyed when she asks things like that, things she should just know. He's not a happy man. She'd like to ask the waiter, but the waiter isn't looking too cheery either. She looks into the tangle of spaghetti, the juicy castanets and their parsley confetti, a gathering of smiles looking positively chatty. Still, she'll Google it when she gets home. Clams swimming. She would like to know more about clams. Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Do we have time for a Q&A? We don't have time. Well, does anybody really have one burning question? Okay, well, books are available for sale in the lobby, and thanks again for being here. Have a wonderful night.